1 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a special called workshop meeting of the Commissioners Court of Hood County, Texas. Today is Wednesday, April the 30th, 2025. It's 1 p.m. We're in the central jury room of the Ralph H. Walton Jr. Justice Center at 1200 West Pearl Street in Granbury, Texas. You want to say the invocation, Commissioner Andrews?
If you would please pray with me. Heavenly Father and Holy God, Lord, we thank you for this day that you've given us to come together, Father, for the good people that are here to work together for the county, the city, the Stephenville, Erath County, Father. We thank you for everybody's willingness and participation to come here. We ask, Father, for your guidance to give us the wisdom to make the decisions that need to be done to further our service into the public, provide for the emergency care. Father, we thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I pledge to great state of Texas.
I honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, the purpose of this workshop here is to discuss the Granbury Regional Network, radio network. You want to start, Ms. Campbell? Or
Judge, Commissioners, I appreciate you guys' time today. If you don't mind, I have something prepared to read just to kind of give us a recap of where we started and kind of where we've ended up as of today, and then we can open it up for questions or discussion after that, if that's okay. We began this discussion about March 20th with a meeting between IT, emergency management, and dispatch. And the goal of that conversation was to outline how the workload for radio programming and the radio network should be distributed among departments within the county. And it was really productive, and it laid a strong foundation for the work that lies ahead, and there's quite a bit. Next, we met with Commissioners Andrews and Commissioner Wilson and continued that discussion. And we dove deeper into several important areas related to sheltering, generators, the microwave systems, the R&M, and overall programming responsibilities. And we talked about Hood County's role in ensuring network operability for all the stakeholder agencies involved. A major point of discussion in that meeting was the $13 per radio fee and what that covers and how it's contributing to our overall capabilities. Then we had a separate meeting with Granbury IT, and there we reviewed contract specifics, and that included access for protocols, troubleshooting microwave links, VPN access, and how we could improve interoperability between our neighboring counties. Following that, we met with the county judge, Commissioner Wilson, as well as representatives from Erath County and Stephenville Police Department to further the discussion. A key concern was raised, and that was the lack of communication with Granbury. We also addressed programming issues, dongle availability, and entries into the UAS system. It was clear that more conversations and more coordination was needed, and we're committed to closing those gaps with the city of Granbury. Finally, we reconvened with emergency management, dispatch, and Granbury leadership for a fifth meeting. And this was an opportunity to kind of align on actions that needed to be taken and steps on how we should move forward and ensure that leadership among the city and the county were unified in the approach. I'm pleased to also share that we've hired a dedicated radio technician for Hood County. This addition is going to significantly help us manage the workload moving forward and maintaining high levels of service for our county. All of these meetings represent meaningful progress towards improving our radio system and building stronger collaboration across departments and across counties. We're moving forward with clarity and purpose, and I would like to thank everyone involved thus far. I really wanted you guys to all be here. That way we can talk together. As a court, it's kind of hard. We can only talk to a couple of you at a time, and I think it's important that all of you are involved in the discussion today. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Chris Collins. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of Granbury. You should have a slide deck that was provided to you, which is on the screen. I'm going to talk about some of the information related to that slide deck, and then I'm also going to kind of give you the history of how we are, how we got here, and where we're trying to go forward to. So I'm going to go over some acronyms. The Granbury Regional Radio Network, in the slide you're going to see referenced as GRN, the Regional Network Monitor, which is the tool that dispatch currently has to look at the health of the network as far as systems being up and down. The SUMS is how Harris sends us the security updates that are required to go on the core that get deployed to the various systems and updating firmware associated with portable and mobile devices. SMS, that's just a capability that they have for sending messages like you do text message. Network Operations Center, Secure Operations Center are the two major components that we're looking to add. I will elaborate more on what those are as I go forward. And then as identified, the Unified Administration System, the UAS, is pretty much the gateway and the administration function that's on the core that relegates what devices are allowed to communicate on the P25 system that we currently have. So this is a high-level network topology of how the system is set up right now, and so it shows various towers. The key important thing to look at is the dotted lines show the multicast sites, and if you look at Granbury's area and Hood County's area, it's very well developed with redundancy and capabilities, whereas some of the other sites that have been added since then have what we call single points of failure. So we call them spurs. So if you look at the Northwest and Morgan Hill, those are spurs of their own. And then Stephenville Dispatch is a spur of its own. A lot of those issues are related to funding, but also to capabilities of availability of technology. So there currently isn't fiber connections to all those towers. So like in Granbury, we're able to directly connect to our cores and other radio towers through fiber connections as a backup redundancy. Most of the remote sites that are connecting right now are using a Cilio network connection and then the transmit and receive for the different devices. So when you think about the Granbury Regional Radio Network, the GRN, it's really a ecosystem of two types of systems. So most people think, oh, it's just a radio network. Yes, that's true, but it has two entities. One being the IT specific, more related stuff. So your firewalls, how you access and who's allowed to access different parts of the network to do administration. And then you have your communications stack, which goes to the network stack to say, hey, is this an authorized radio? Is this an authorized user, et cetera, to kind of go forward. The city, when it was decided that we would go to this system, spent a lot of money to make sure that our cores, the network side, has the ability to communicate and replicate so that if there's a failure, a tower gets knocked out or a fiber gets cut, there's redundancy built in so that communications on whoever's added to our system can maintain their communications. That being said, as they've added the different sites, the limitations that currently exist associated with topology, technology availability has created, or funding has created some points of failures that on paper, they're not single points of failures because they'll have say they have two microwave antennas, but in some cases, those two microwave antennas get knocked out, then that site's completely down. So like I said, the city invested a lot in technology. So just from a fiber perspective, the city spends close to $4,000 a month just to ensure that our cores can communicate, and when updates are done, those updates are done in real time. So for example, if our east tower gets hit, it's not going to cause the radio network to go down. If our police department gets hit, it's not going to cause the radio network to go down because the cores are diversely separate. That's a lot of costs associated with standing up one of these systems and then maintaining these systems. Some of the other things that people don't think about on a regular basis is compliance. Our radio network is completely separate from the city network. And so from a CJIS compliance perspective, we only authorize, the city actually has 10 licenses for VPN, 4 of which are slated for city access, and the other 6 are for dedicated technicians that are certified and compliant that are with Harris. Currently, we are allowing Hood County to use one of the city VPN connections, which was previously Cliff Andrews' connection, to see the R&M.
Chris, could you say that again? There's 10.
There's 10 total. 6 are slated automatically per the contract for Harris to be able to troubleshoot and have their technicians in our system. That changes as they hire, and then 4 were slated for the city.
Okay.
Are you okay with taking some questions as we go?
Oh,
or
yes,
do
sir.
you want to do this and then come back to things?
I would like to go through the presentation unless you need clarification on something that I'm speaking about right at that moment.
Okay, all right. I'll wait till.
Okay, so what I have up right now is our R&M tool. That is the tool that dispatch currently has up and running when Sean logs in. You can see the different tabs associated with the types of things that you can look at, and then the level of detail that each tab gives you. So I call it, the system's like a red light, green light, yellow light. So it's like a stoplight, basically. And so from a network monitoring perspective, to kind of loop back to how this all started, when the contract was signed, the city had outsourced IT. They used consultants and Harris to basically design the system. When I was reviewing the contract, because a year ago in June, I got a call from Harris and they said, hey, we would like to sell you secure operations. And I said, we already have that. And they're like, it's impossible. We just started offering it a month ago. So then I immediately called Harry, our sales rep, and was like, hey, what's going on with this? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Let me get back to you. Well, it took all the way up until the owners meeting, which we had at LCRA in February, for them to actually have someone that could finally talk to me about the solution. So he's like, watch this presentation and, ask any questions you need to ask. So going back to our original contract, in our contract it said there's network monitoring, there's security updates, there's security monitoring. All of those things exist in the system currently today, but with today's technology, you need 24/7, 365, eyes on glass watching it. The previous staff, that when this contract was signed, in their mind, that's what was happening. They didn't have the technology mindset or know what is required. And so when the radio was turned over to me by Cliff, he was my deputy chief. I'm still an officer with Granbury. He told me, hey, these are the things that we're getting. So when I got that call from the sales lady in Harris saying, hey, we're selling these services, I was kind of shocked. So when I was at the owners meeting, they went through the presentation and I started asking technical questions because I want to make sure, because you guys are my customer, that I can answer questions and ensure that any cyber attack or any cyber event that could occur against our radio network that could take down communications were answered. After about 15 minutes of questions, the guy from Harris was like, I'm sorry, I'm just a project manager, I can't answer these questions. And then Harry said, now I have what I need to get engineers in a room with you so that they can answer your questions. So in March, Harry brought 5 engineers to my office, and we walked through what we have. And from a current service offering on this slide, it shows that we have Monday through Friday, standard response. So that means if we have an outage or something like that, they will fix it. If it's after hours, then there's a billing. And if it's on the weekends, there's a billing associated with it. Preventative maintenance, they basically will make sure our transmitters are optimized annually. If there's parts that fail, like we had a time clock fail, they will come, pull the time clock out, put a new time clock in, repair it, and then put our equipment back in there. And then you get the premium technical support, which is a website you can go to, and if you have technical background, you can go and try to figure out the solution. 24/7 remote engineering support, that's a line you can call and get one of their engineers on the phone. And then the third-party licensing is for all of the equipment in the rack. So for example, the firewalls. They manage our firewalls, they renew them and they update them because they know if it'll break or not break their system. I talked about the sums and then obviously obsolete components that had to be replaced because of end of life. So when I was down at the owners meeting, this is all of Texas Harris customers. There have been a lot of discussions related to things that, and it wasn't the sales guy's fault, because if the engineer says this is what you're getting and the sales guy reads it, if he's not a technical person, he's going to read it as, hey, yeah, you're getting this, and that's what he's going to sell. So some of the issues that were identified in that meeting related to third-party renewal, some organizations decided to put this behind their company network or their corporate network so that they could do the monitoring and get protection because they actually had the staffing for it because they're large. San Antonio was one of those organizations. During that meeting, when I started voicing my concerns to the security folks, people started raising their hand. They're like, we've been trying to get this fixed by Harris for all of these years, and no one could ever speak the technical language that needed to be taught so they could understand it. So San Antonio actually had a critical update to their corporate firewall that they could not deploy for 4 days, because if they would have deployed that update to the firewall, it would have taken down their entire radio network. And that's why, and part of the reasons why this network is separate, because it should be separate from the network, and Harris will know when I'm pushing this patch out, it's not going to take the network down. Whereas if it's behind or managed by another entity, that could potentially happen. Anybody have questions from here on? Okay. So like Margaret said, we sat down, we got a list, and this list was provided to the judge, by the judge as well, but we sat down and we went through this list of concerns that were voiced, and as a customer, it's our job to try to address these as soon as possible. So related to the lack of monitoring 24/7, 365, as of that meeting that I had in March, I went to Harris and told them, this is what I want. They said, okay, we'll get you a quote, because I've been trying to update the interlocal agreement, but I knew this was coming, so I was waiting to get the price for doing this upgrade. They initially sent me a price for the SOC services. They told me about those services. It's a third party that they're using, that they have agreements with, that are going to do all the security monitoring 24/7, 365. When they originally priced out the NOC services, they were only pricing out the NOC services for the city. And I said, no, I need this to be for my existing customers and any customers that you guys go forward that Harris sells. They need to know, these are the requirements that have to occur. So when you're looking at the verbiage there, it's 24/7, 365. There are some non-supported, because there's a caveat that they have in there, for example, the city and the county are currently using Cilio Networks, which is a Texas microwave network company. They are not a standard provider for Harris, so meaning Harris doesn't use them on a regular basis for all their deployments, so they consider them a third party. In those instances, in order for the monitoring and the response that Harris is going to do in the event of a outage or a problem, or I'll call it a yellow light, there has to be agreements either in place with the county, for instance, and Harris saying, yes, you can reach out directly to Cilio if we think there's a problem, or the county would have to be like a liaison between that entity and Harris, because Harris can't basically directly interface with a entity they don't have a contract with unless there's some kind of agreement. So from a NOC perspective, currently, if they see something go red or communications go down, Sean or me or someone else that gets notified of this would contact CARES and they would start working. With this service, they are watching this all the time, 24/7, 365. Right now, we're in a reactive state, to be honest. So if something goes down, then we go try to put the fire out. Sean and dispatch doesn't have the knowledge that Harris has, nor do I have the knowledge of all the intricacies of if something goes yellow, what does that mean? If it goes yellow, it could be that, hey, we had a windstorm and one of the microwave antennas has a dB loss. With this service, they would see that, and with the extra service that I am proposing for 24/7, 365, not this Monday through Friday deal, they can be more proactive. So if they see an antenna losing dB, they know, hey, that's what the problem is. We can go ahead and dispatch a technician to go take care of that issue before it becomes an outage. Question 2 was related to VPN access to the GRN. Currently, dispatch does have access to the GRN. If we, because we would all be paying for this, are paying for Harris to do this, it creates a security risk to the radio network to have an additional user logging in to the system on a regular basis. If the county would like to still have that in place, the city is okay with it. There would just have to be a clause in our interlocal agreement that says if we have a breach and the investigation reveals that it came from a compromised VPN account the county was using, then there would have to be some fiduciary obligation on the county side to help bring the network back up or take care of any financial things related to that. Question 3 was intermittent connections between radio towers due to lack of redundant connections. I have interfaced with United Co-op. When I went down to meet with LCRA, there are large electric co-ops that are trying to spread connectivity to rural areas. There are grants available. I was at TAG ITM, which is the IT consortium for all Texas municipalities this past weekend in San Antonio. A lot of the smaller counties or smaller cities that didn't have the funding, they did a combination of grants, but then they also, to get redundancy, they came together and basically sliced the pie up to see if it's, we'll say if it's $500,000 to get the more stable redundancy of fiber, they slice that pie up across the board, and the city is willing to help with the grants and also help with the knowledge if it's required to help these organizations that have these single points of failures to get better connectivity. Hood County, working with Parker County, I became aware of that through the deputy chief when Parker County first originally reached out, and I told the previous deputy chief that we're looking at updating the MOU, and I found out that from our attorney that we should be on interlocal agreements, so that kind of changed the ball. Then when I got the call in June, we don't have the service. Now I'm having to figure out, okay, now I'm having to change. It's not going to end up being $13 a month. There's going to be an additional cost if we can get this. And so that's kind of how that got pushed along. When the previous deputy chief retired, Parker County reached out directly to me, and I told them, I have current MOUs that I need to convert to interlocal agreements with my current customers. I would like to get them normalized and on the appropriate contract prior to bringing someone else on and basically creating extra work for my department. From a city perspective, I did have a dedicated radio technician. His job was to do any radio work as soon as it came in. Our current MOU that we have with all the entities that are assigned, it says the city is supposed to receive 10, any adds, deletes, or changes in the amount of radios on the network, we're supposed to be provided 10 business days. I'm only knowing these details because I've dug deep into it. But in most cases, those were resolved within a couple days. And the city is willing to put a service level agreement associated with normal requests. Because we have the vacancy now, but when we had a dedicated body, his direction to me was, if it's a radio request, that's what you're doing. You get that done, and then you can go back to doing other IT stuff. So who programs radios and who connects to the GRN? So going back to the UAS. The UAS is the gatekeeper for what devices are allowed to communicate. And when I say communicate, when I talked about the ecosystem on the IT side and the communication side. So on the communication side in the UAS, we actually have to add the serial number, the frequency, and the device ID that's specific to that entity. And once they provide that to us, they program the radio, and when the radio turns on, it connects to the network and is like, is this an authorized connection? If it is, then it allows it to connect. That is a core function that stays with the core when I spoke to other entities. This isn't something that you let other partner agencies that are on your system have access to, because there's naming conventions and standardizations. If everybody's adding whatever they want to add, it becomes a big mess, and then if you have a rogue item on there, it's kind of hard to know about. So provisions for critical and non-critical GRN issues. I talked about the rapid response option. It's not cheap. It's I think it's around a little over $33,000 a year. I'm proposing that we do it this year and see if it benefits. I've still been trying to dive through the 500-page document to see what their holiday or after hours click charge is. I could assume that it's pretty pricey, but if the city and our customers aren't getting value out of this rapid response because we're not having to implement it because we have the NOC and the SOC security monitoring and the more proactive approach versus a reactive approach, then the city's willing to maybe not go that route and just budget a lesser amount for that type of response. As far as the fee schedule goes, historically it's been in the MOU. It was looking like we were going to try to put in the local agreement. The reason why I didn't prefer to do that is because if it changes, which it's going to change as people come to the network or as we decide to change or remove services that we don't think are valuable, then we have to go back and have everybody look at the interlocal agreement and sign it again. So what we decided to do is we're going to publish it as a fee schedule on our city website. You will still receive a detailed invoice like we are sending right now for the billing of your radios. But that's kind of where we're at on that. When we're talking about incidents and repairs, you guys just have to understand, if it's not Harris standard equipment, and I already said this once, but I want to reiterate it, that agreement with whatever entity you're using and Harris has to be in place, or else it's going to be, hey, your network went down, it's related to your Cilio, and then now you guys are going to go back to the more reactive state versus being proactive.
So who, in that circumstance, let's take the microwave failure that we had that knocked Stephenville out. It's on our tower. We've got a third party that does tower climbing or whatever. Yep. So we've got to go call this third party, send them out to readjust the microwave signal so that Stephenville can get back on your network. This is a pretty complicated mess. We've got several entities involved in this one decision. If we have this program in place and something alerts and says, hey, we're not communicating with Stephenville anymore, they're not on the network, who pays to get that fixed? Is that part of the cost of this contract? Or does it go back on the county? It's on the county's tower, and how does that work?
So if it is a non-standard Harris device, even the city has to pay for that out of their pocket. So from a city perspective, we have money set aside for radio miscellaneous things that it's not under a contract. And so from your example, currently, if it goes down, it's when Stephenville calls, or if they see it go down, and this is just talking not a failure, but an alignment problem, the R&M would register, because there's thresholds that they set in those things, because they know what dB they should be at. And unless there's a freak wind gust or a tornado that jerks it in the millisecond, having Harris people that know what those limits are, what the restrictions are on, if it's going to drop or if it's going to cause, allows them to be more proactive. And that kind of goes to that agreement where if Hood County says, hey, you could call Celio directly when this is happening, and you could tell them to climb the tower and fix it before it breaks, and you guys have the money to pay your contractor that aspect, then yes. But in the scenario we're at right now, if dispatch sees it goes red, because they're not going to, if it's yellow, he's not going to have time to sit there and click. And that's why I wanted you guys to see all the things that are on here. If you look at what it's telling, it's saying PSAT beyond subagency, PSAT group configuration. I know radios, I know networks, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Harris technicians know exactly what that means. And so it's yellow. That means it's not down. That means, hey, I need some help over here if someone can fix me before I need help. And that's why Harris has 6 VPN accounts into our core, so they could do those types of fixes. But we don't have that service right now because they're not monitoring our core.
I would say too that we have the contract with JTS to fix the microwave links when they go down. At the same time too, you're still paying for the Harris stuff to fix it because you pay the yearly maintenance fee, which this year's what,
This year's $83,000.
is $83,000. So you're paying money no matter what.
That's the $13 per radio.
No.
Oh, that's separate from the,
That's separate. It's a 15-year Harris maintenance contract that the county has, and that goes for repairing and replacing equipment before it becomes end of life and making those repairs. So we're paying Harris and JTS maintenance contracts every year, no matter what.
And that's for them. So when something breaks, we call them and they come out there to start looking. So like right now, Chalk Mountain just went down during these storms. So my first call was the escalation plan to Harris, and Harris logs into the R&M and they say, yep, Chalk Mountain's down. But Carrie from Stephenville was already on the phone with me saying, hey, our towers went down. Dispatch is calling me saying, hey, Chalk Mountain and Pray they're down because we can see it on our consoles. But in the end, you're paying JTS and you're paying Harris no matter what.
So each entity that joins the GRN, you have your own equipment that you paid for. So like, for instance, in the city of Granbury, we paid a little over $2.1 million for just the Harris equipment, not putting in the shelters, not putting in the redundancy for the fiber, not all of the data stuff that allows those cores to communicate and to keep your communications up when you're not having connectivity issues. Those are all things that the city paid for up front. And the maintenance agreement that you're paying for is with our current contract. They are replacing our core halfway through, and that's where that original part of the $13 came from.
So,
And based off of that, the way Harris does all of their contracts, so when we sign this contract right now, there's approximately 900 radios on the network. We're going to get charged, and that charge you see there is based on what we have. So next year when we go to renew, if we don't change any services, add or remove, that cost may come down a little bit because we should have projected right now between 1,400 and 1,600 radios on the network. So originally when they said the cost of the radio network is going to come down, the maintenance agreement based on how many people join, was if nothing changed. We've been adding stuff, and that's why I wanted to originally update the MOU to see, hey, we're truing up now to see if we can reduce the $13. But when I found out that, hey, our network is not getting monitored from a security perspective, and our network's not getting monitored 24/7 by engineers and technicians that know every single detail of what's happening, I was like, that's not good for the customers. That's not good for us. And so that's why I pursued getting these, and that's why the MOU, and which is now the interlocal agreement, was delayed. Because I want to make sure when I tell you this is what you're getting, and when I talk to customers, so Harry was trying to sell to the Toller ISD. I went there and talked to them and told them about, what capabilities we have. And at that time, I was speaking what I believe to be the truth. And so as my customer, now the things that I presented to you, they are what Harris will provide, with the caveats of that third party. And like I said, we use Cilio Networks for some of our stuff. You have to have that maintenance built in, and like Sean just said, he has JTS stuff built in. So there's still things outside of the maintenance agreement that you pay per radio that's required, but that's to keep the core in the original agreement that we had and the core upgrades. Harris is actually not selling what they sold us anymore, because they know they're going to lose money on this deal because the potential tariffs and the price. They were selling these cores for a long time, and Harry's like, we can't do that anymore because we don't know in 7 years what this could potentially cost. And so we kind of got lucky with that aspect, because we're getting, kind of like Axon, we're getting new stuff in the middle and then towards the end, and that gives this radio system a lot more life and a lot smaller purchase price if we had to forklift and change it.
Okay, I guess break it down in a super simple sort of way. What is it that everybody's paying $13 a month per radio?
So if you go to the
get?
last page, it shows the financials. So,
On this slide.
oh yeah, yes ma'am.
Yeah, I don't have the.
So the $13 per radio is for mobiles and portables. The county has consoles, so you pay $4.50 per console, and then there's a core access fee, which originally, when the city and the county decided to do this radio project together, they had to base the count. So when I say they looked at the big number, and they divided that big number by how many devices were going to be on the radio, and that's how they came up with the $13. The updated price reflects adding the NOC, the SOC, and the rapid response, which gives us 24/7, 365 for all services that Harris currently offers. Increase the price per radio by it's actually $3.12, but I kept it at $16 and not put the 12 cents on there, or round up to 17. What I want to make sure the county and the customers know, the city is not trying to turn this into a revenue generator. We're just trying to break even and cover the costs associated with maintaining this radio network, making sure it stays secure, and making sure it's properly staffed for the customers that we have.
So you're saying the $13 is paying for the maintenance fees for you guys to do the core, for salaries, for your positions on
So
the
no,
network?
originally,
I think that's what he's asking.
No, at $13, no, that was originally just to replace for the 14-year contract or 15-year contract the city signed. It had,
That's the maintenance, though, right?
correct,
That was,
So paying for the
correct. That's the maintenance on the cores and
so
all
it's
of
not okay, there was an initial investment that the city made.
of $2.1 and some change million to buy the equipment.
And then there's the ongoing, kind of like your cell phone, you have an ongoing maintenance charge every month that you pay whoever
Correct.
your provider is, and that's what this is, so.
Yes, ma'am. So year one, the city didn't, year one in the contract, we didn't pay anything, so we didn't charge you anything. And the way that, I don't know if this was a Harris thing or the way that the city has done it going forward, is until you're, so like Somerville, they have some connectivity to us, but their Harris stuff isn't up and running. So we don't bill you the $13 until you're normalized on our system. And so going to the $13, they basically took what the maintenance was and they divided it. And the city actually I have to budget that money every year to pay them a lump sum. And then that money that we get we basically just accrue it. So then the next year, the city still pays our portion, which isn't up there, but however many radios the city has, we pay our portion. And then the money we collect from the entities that join, that money gets divvied out as well.
So that's a fixed amount regardless of the number of radios that are on the system, correct?
No, so like I said before, how Harris does their licensing on anything. So the city bought OTAR, we're still waiting for it to come in. That's for us to be able to program or update firmware on radios over the air, which is has about a 90% take. So if you have 100 radios, you have to touch 10 instead of 100. The city bought that outright without charging you guys anything, because to me, that's something that makes our lives easier and makes us more efficient. And so we paid for that, and we had to pay for however many radios. So at the time, it's 900 radios. We had to pay licensing to be able to program 900 radios. So that's how Harris does all of their services. So the knock, sock, and rapid response is based on, at that time, when you sign, how many devices are they watching, monitoring, and covering?
A minute ago, you said that the total number of radios on the network was 900.
It's approximately 900.
And
And
the
Hood County is the
has
biggest.
700 of the
Yes,
900.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got that. And so okay, let me make sure I understand this. So the initial investment by the city is not what the $13 is
No,
going
ma'am.
to.
You
It's
guys-
going to an annual maintenance, whatever, let's say Harris charges us $100,000, charges you $100,000 annual maintenance. Then you take the number of radios, whatever that is,
At
to
that-
make up the 100,000, and that's what you charge.
Yes,
or
ma'am. And-
bill each of the entities for
Yes,
the number
ma'am.
of radios. Okay.
And that's when they originally put out MOUs. They said the amount would decrease because as you add radios, that was the thought. Part of the reasons why I want to have the interlocal agreement not say a specific amount, but reference our fee schedule, is to give us the flexibility and to remove the administrative overhead of having to have conversations like this, where it says in the interlocal agreement, you'll be charged a reasonable fee that will be posted on our fee schedule and will be a detailed bill associated with your monthly charges. So if next year we decide we don't want to pay for rapid response because we used it one time, and it would have cost us, if we paid the on-demand fee, $5,000, it doesn't make sense. So then the city would say, hey, we're gonna drop that, and we're gonna drop that to $15,000, and we'll just see if that works.
Why would the annual, I know in IT contracts, there's a normal escalation for annual maintenance. Sometimes it's 3%, sometimes it's 5%. So is that how the annual maintenance changes, or does it change based on some other method that Harris came up with?
No, so Harris had a fix, and this is why I said they're not doing it anymore. They had an algorithm that ran that said, hey, if we're going to replace the GRN's core by this time, based on things we're going to have to repair and replace over time, that's how they come up with their maintenance agreement schedule. So that's why I showed you this, which is one of the first slides, which is what we're currently covered under our maintenance agreement. So SUMS is one of the things that they provide, where they send us a USB token, and we have to go to the core, put the USB token in, upload all the updates, and then they verify remotely that the updates took to firewall, the updates took to all the servers on the IT stack, and then any updates on the comm side took. That's part of that maintenance agreement package.
So how has the city known what to budget for maintenance from Harris? How did you know?
So
It was
on the
100,000 year one, now it's going to be 105,000. I mean, how did you know what to budget?
On the original master service agreement, we had a pay schedule, which you guys had when we when we started. And that's how Trout and Harris came up with the $13. That's my understanding.
Okay.
I wasn't part of that. I was just a patrol officer then. But that was my understanding. And so when I'm adding these services, it's in addition to, because it's enhancing our maintenance with Harris. So basically what I did was I added what I knew our next year was going to be, put those items into my budget, and then divided by 900 because I need to sign this agreement as soon as possible. So the city is actually going to have to do a budget amendment once this is approved to pay for it so we can get it as soon as possible. I have budgeted for the following fiscal year to have these services in there already. But this is something that needs to happen.
Okay, I have some other questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it time now to ask?
Oh, you can ask questions. I went through my presentation.
Can I ask
so.
a clarifying question really quick?
Yep.
I'm sorry. So like for Harris maintenance for the county, we have a 15-year fee schedule.
Yep.
So we know how we can budget for the next 15 years.
Yep.
It sounds like that's the same
Yep.
thing that you guys have. Okay. My other question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like on the county side, we're paying our own Harris maintenance fee, and then we're also paying a portion of the city's Harris maintenance fee as well?
No, it's to replace the maintenance fee. So I'll back up. So if you guys want to pay for SOC services on your own, NOC services on your own, and update your services, you can go to Harris and do that.
But we're not talking about knocking stock services.
No.
Okay.
Let me explain. Then you would still just be getting your $13. The $13, which is part of our original MOU agreement with you guys, is to fund the replacement of the cores to give this radio system a 15-year lifespan. So that's the maintenance, the replacement, and support for the duration of this entire, when I'm talking about that, that's the cores. You guys don't, if we didn't have a core, the maintenance you're paying for would go nowhere.
Right. I understand that. And our 15-year maintenance contract, what we're paying for is to maintain and to replace things before their end of life. It just sounds like the city or the county is paying for a portion of y'all's annual maintenance fee with Harris.
For the core.
That's what I'm just trying to clarify.
No, so the way they came up with the $13 originally was based on how many radios the city was going to have and how many radios the county was going to have. And that's why previously it was published that the fee might go down as they added people to the radio network.
Let me give a visual.
Yep.
Right.
That's what y'all are paying your service fee. You're participating in the cost of keeping this core up and running.
Yeah.
Right. But that was in a contract and it was laid out. It was like that. It said year one, you're paying this much, year two, you're paying this much. What's the variable? Where has there? No, I understand that, but it was $13 per radio, and we were talking about 300 radios. Then we had 400 more, and that number didn't change. What is the variable? Is there a cost per radio per month? Is there some factor in there that makes that a variable instead of just that contract for 15 years or whatever that we initially began with the focus on the core and the normal wear and tear and replaceable parts?
So you're saying that $13 times 400 is a lot different than $13 times 700.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so where's that other,
Okay,
what's that other money going to fund?
And so the first year, the city didn't charge for maintenance.
Right.
The city, the next year, paid the maintenance up front, and that's when we started collecting from you guys. We didn't have the nest egg, so we paid the first year maintenance up front, and that's when we started to bill you guys. Now, every year, based on that 15-year scale, we're just trying to keep that number whole, and that's where that $13 originally was, and that's where they kept saying, if you add radios and nothing changes, that fee should come down. The reason why the fee hasn't come down is because the existing MOUs are in place. I was trying to update them and get them changed based on who's come on, and granted, you guys added radios, so you're paying more right now. based off of what we're trying to add now and the 900 radios that we have active, if we didn't add those services, yes, your cost would have came down. But because we want to add the services to protect the network and to give you a more stable, non-reactive, proactive network.
And I want to make it clear, I don't want this to be adversarial in any way. That's not, I think that it's very critically important that we all get on the same page and work together. I think that having some kind of centralized response to something is a very good idea. I don't know how Erath County comes to you guys and says, here's our contract to get on your radio. Hopefully Hood County keeps their end up and gets the signal to us. That's a weird situation.
Correct. And that's part of the reasons why. So there wasn't a person like me. So when Harry was going and selling, just like salesmen do, and it's nothing against Harry, this is just a salesman thing, they're going to sell you whatever they can sell you. And so because I've asked Harry, now when you go talk to someone, I want to be there because I want to make sure I know what you're saying the city's going to do to make sure we're staying in our lanes. And it wasn't that he wasn't staying in his lane because he thought he was selling what he was told. And it wasn't until we had that conversation, and then when we sat down, and I had the communications with him, when he sent me the email for the not quote, and I was like, man, this doesn't seem like this is right. I asked him, I said, is this covering my entire GRN? And that knock guy was like, no. And I said, that's not what I asked for. I asked, and that's why if you look in this slide here, which is from Harris, it tells you exactly what they're going to do.
My first question. In the years that I wrote down, I've been asking questions as we go, but I was trying to keep a record of questions to ask you at the end. So in the years since we've had the GRN, when it went live, what year did it go live? 21, 22?
It was supposed to go live in 21. It was supposed to go live in 22, and it went live late 22. So we were on it, but it wasn't official.
Okay. So what has the behavior been of L3 Harris when there's been some issue after 5 o'clock or on the weekend?
So
have they just said you're on your own, or?
So what I can speak from my perspective, again, when the previous deputy chief was here, he was handling all that. I got handed this last spring, and I actually had a radio technician then that I just brought on. He still wasn't certified, but he was green. When there was an issue, their support guy would come out their tech support guy would come out if he was required. And most of the issues that I experienced during that time were during the day. I didn't have after hours experience. I did hear about Chalk Mountain going down. And that kind of goes back to talking to Harry. I was like, why did you sell a single point of failure? And he's like, well, it's not a single point of failure because it has redundant microwaves. I said, but they're on the same tower. So if something happens to that tower, you're having a whole city's communications go down.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is you're very kind of opening when you talked about the initial contract with Harris, and the way it read is they'll provide this service and that service. And if their behavior has been, since the implementation of this contract, that they have been answering calls off hours and on weekends, then it seems to me that the contract did provide for that. Not in these words, it says now they're changing it to say now we're not going to do that. But it seems to me that if their behavior, and we'd have to go back and look over the years to see what incidents we've had, have they been after hours, what was their response time, and did they charge us for it?
Correct.
If they came out and they fixed it after hours and they didn't charge it for us, we got lawyers in this room, I'm not one, but 3 lawyers at least in this room. If their behavior has been that they were honoring that, then it seems to me that that was in the contract. Question or responses from lawyers, please.
Ricky, you have a question. You didn't raise your hand. So the city put out $2.5 million.
Can you come up?
Come up to the microphone.
Kind of confusing. So the city put $2.5 million out for the regional cores, correct? And so that was the outlay the city provided to start the network.
And then the maintenance agreements are what you're charging the fee for each radio. And in that maintenance agreement over 15 years, they're replacing the cores.
Yes, sir.
So eventually they're paying you $2.5 million back out of that.
Plus more, because it's gonna cost more.
Right, it's gonna,
It's gonna replace the,
tame.
it's gonna keep the system up and running for 15 years.
So the maintenance contract is a little over $4 million for the 15 years. And that's replacing and maintaining the equipment for the duration of that.
Okay.
Whereas if, say,
I haven't heard we're going on to a different question. I haven't heard a response.
It's called latches or estoppel or waiver. It still goes back to the wording of the original contract. If the original contract states that they could or could not charge but didn't charge, you would have a hell of a lawsuit about saying whether or not they are estopped or waiver or latches. These are all equity points, not necessarily law. There's law, the legality, and then there's equity. You agree with that, Mr.?
Yeah, that's what's in the original contract. The original contract might say no other provisions can be added. This is very common.
Can you come up to the microphone?
Yeah. Come on, say what you said. I think you probably said it more eloquently because I'm not wasn't a contract lawyer, but as such, but.
So it depends what's in the original contract.
Right.
Typically, contracts have a provision that says no other provisions outside the terms of this contract are part of the contract.
But it did say, according to what you started out saying, Chris, was that it did say that they would provide maintenance and response.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, and there wasn't a time limit on it?
No, it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
No, in the original contract?
Yes, ma'am.
And
So
you didn't see that?
I
Or
can
nobody
only-
noticed that?
I can only speak to the experiences that the city has had. So we had a time clock failure and we had a GPS failure.
Okay.
Both of those failures happened during the day. They identified them and they replaced them during the day.
Okay, so when you started describing the original contract, what I heard was there was no time frame in the original contract, and then they handed you this that says, now we're going to give you this that says it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
No, not a time frame. So what I said was related to what they charge for after hours. I haven't been able to find the fee in the contract that they charge for after hours, on demand, quote, on demand, off hours.
But they did reference that in the original contract, off hours?
So this slide that I have here is where I started to dig, because I asked them, I said, when I had my meeting, I was like, what does Granbury have right now? And this is the slide that they provided me, and that's.
Did you get this out of the contract, or you got this from?
I got this from Harris. This is directly from Harris.
So we need to, do we have the contract, or do you have the contract?
So we have the contract for our core, and again, it's a little bit different. So when we talk about Granbury, we're talking about core services and any equipment that Granbury bought to stand up the IT portion of it and the comm portion of it.
Okay.
All the other entities that have joined to connect to us is a separate agreement with Harris, could have separate maintenance timeframes associated with it. And so I can only speak to when repairs have been done on our equipment and on
Whether or not they charged you for it.
We haven't been charged for the equipment that's been
But
replaced.
it's all been between 8 and 5 on Monday through Friday. Okay. On your second,
Can I add on to that? So we use Harris all the time, after hours. So the ice storm 2 years ago, they came out there, it turned out to be the microwave links, but Josh was out there for hours and hours. I think we started at 10 o'clock at night, we didn't leave till 6 in the morning, never got charged. All these weather, tornado stuff we had, we've called Josh after hours. They fixed everything. Power amplifiers, we've never been charged, and most of our stuff is always after hours.
well, that's what I'm saying. I think their behavior has been that they have not been charging for the Monday through, or the after hours. So we'll have to look into that. But my second question is on your question number 2 on the VPN.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you put that slide back up here? Okay. How is that different? So when you go through this, since Harris is now being paid to provide 24/7 monitoring, then it becomes a security risk. Just because we're paying them? Because
No.
that doesn't make any sense
No,
to
the
me.
security risk is currently, because we don't have 24/7, 365, dispatch has access to our core.
Right.
So they are VPNing in, so if for some reason something happens on his computer or on the county network, and that computer is VPN'd into our core, it will get onto our core.
But it's currently that way now.
Correct, because we want to have if no one's watching it, then the only time they'll know something's going down is when they get the call.
Okay, so what you're saying then, it's not that, because what you have here is
It's
that
an acceptable risk that
becomes a security risk because we're paying them to watch it, which isn't really true. It's, you're saying you're okay with having the security risk now, but you wouldn't be okay with having the security risk if we're paying for 24/7 service.
Correct.
But you're okay with having.
I'm willing to accept the risk right now because I want to make sure our communications don't go down.
Okay.
I don't want it to be, oh, we're disconnected. I'm trying to be as proactive as we can be right now. The city doesn't have a 24/7.
Dispatch is the only thing in Hood County that is 365, 24/7.
And
What you're saying is, once you get knock and sock, you would rather have that because there's no
Need.
accessibility to the core then. That's what you were talking about.
Yes, sir.
before.
Additional
That
access.
if you're still okay with VPN, with the county having access to the core, but if something infiltrates the core, then you want to be able to come back and put some of the responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility, on the county, if that's how the encryption or got in, or
The bug.
The point of intrusion.
hacking got
Yes, sir.
into the core.
Okay, that, I just wanted to clarify that because as it's stated, it looks like it just becomes a risk later, but it's a risk now. You're just accepting the risk.
Correct. And I didn't take over this like full-time until the spring of last year.
Okay.
I was not aware that Hood County had access to it. I became aware when Harris put in two-factor authentication, and then we got a request through my radio tech to give access to Sean, and I was like, why do they need the access? And then I was told he already had the access, and that was because we weren't getting that service.
Yes, we have to be able to monitor 911.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you already answered my other question, which didn't, about why has the cost not come down since we've added radios, and it's because you haven't been able to change the MOU.
Yes, ma'am.
So where has the extra money that's been paid in, because we're paying 700 times 13 versus 400 times 13, so where has that, is it being budgeted off to the side to?
No, ma'am. So there, from a transparency perspective, the city actually moved all radio costs to its own P&L. It's still underneath my department. The city paid the first year of the maintenance for 23, and we didn't collect any money. We didn't start collecting money from our entities until 24.
Okay, so you're saying that you're still catching up on paying for the first year on the extra money that Hood County's been paying on the extra 300 radios?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you have a slide that kind of breaks all that down?
I can get that information for you.
Thank you. That's all my questions so far.
We had a situation where an air conditioner went down, and the backup air conditioner went down, and, you know, it ended up being what we burned up some equipment because of that, because we didn't have any access to be able to monitor that situation. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that, again, how do we cooperate? How do we get all on the same page and be able to catch things like this? Because we ended up, you know, losing equipment and jumping through hoops that, had we been able to know about that earlier, and I guess that's where the NOC or whatever comes in,
And that's my understanding on how the previous deputy, because we had a similar thing where a heater went rogue, and that's what caused our network time clock to go out in our cemetery tower. The way the city remediated that is we put in our own thermostat that would notify our facilities engineer when a temperature reaches a certain threshold. So it was kind of a check the checker because we didn't want it to happen again, because when this happened the first time, it really wasn't Harris's fault, but they replaced it. When you go back to these NOC services, depending upon what you have deployed in your environment, it has to physically be connected to and has to be compatible with the Harris stuff. So if you have a thermostat that's not attached to Harris, that's not going to show, the temperature alarm will show up on the equipment, but usually from an IT perspective, once the equipment starts to heat up, you're past the Powerball. And so on the city side, what we did is we replaced the thermostats with a thermostat that's not tied to the GRN, and we set the temperature at a threshold. I told them it should never get more than 70 degrees because the IT equipment starts to stress. And it'll be a point of no return when you're talking about a small space like a communications box. So that again goes back to those conversations. My background is very diverse. I managed data centers that had millions of dollars of equipment and had hundreds of thousands of customers in them. Managing your environmentals is a huge deal. You have to make sure that you have that type of technology in there, and not just, for me, I wouldn't rely upon the monitors and stuff that they have put in there. I would always have a secondary.
So here's my thing. So all our alarms tie into the RNN. Our sites are remote, so you have to add another cost in there to put some type of wireless network to do that. It's kind of like when we talk about the redundancy, adding fiber into this stuff. It's going to be an additional cost to make everything work. So we just keep adding cost and cost and cost into this, and where is the break point?
Technology is one of those never-ending pits of, it's an expense because you invest money into it, but you have to also protect it and be able to support it and monitor it, and not all the times. So I'll give you an example. We have a managed service provider in the city that watches our network. They have their SOC. They do vulnerability assessments. They do pen tests. But I request third parties to do the same thing to check the checker, because, there are so many tools out there that are very good at one specific thing, but if that specific thing doesn't meet the computer's requirements or the programming requirements, it's not going to tell you. And so I try to build in redundancy, and that's where I talk about what the city's invested. As soon as that was identified, I said, I'm not going to trust. I want another set of eyes that will trigger before my equipment fries
Well,
up.
and in this particular situation that I talked about, so yeah, we go in and pay the extra $83,000 a year or whatever it is for the additional monitoring, and that thermostat isn't hooked up to the system. So now we've got to go in and spend an additional whatever to get a thermostat in there that hooks up with the system, and it's
It's a lot of, it's called death by a thousand cuts, but like, for example, his example, for the thermostat, we put a cradle point, we pay $39, we had the initial investment of a cradle point, and we pay $39 a month with Verizon to keep that cradle point up and running. And to me, that's $2 million equipment, $39 a month for monitoring to give me that peace of mind that I'm going to know when someone, so again, I have a background, I've never been an HVAC tech or anything like that, but I manage data centers, so I know temperatures and how that equipment works. I'd rather have someone that can fix it respond than I get a notification and then I have to call my facilities guy to be like, hey, I need you to go out there and look at this. It's in IT and in tech.
Knock and stop, if something goes wrong with the equipment and you were on that, are they responsible if they don't correct it in time? Do they burden 100% of the liability?
So from an equipment perspective, that's part of, if it's their equipment, they will take care of it. That's why it says not included are traps not connected to the LMRN, such as third-party services, so alarm systems and other providers and non-standard equipment. So when you're talking Cilio networks, if
That's some of our stuff that's out here, that's our own network that wouldn't be covered
Right, so that's
under
why
knock and sock.
so that's why we installed the monitoring, the microwave monitoring network. The problem is, don't take this the wrong way, but if we're worried about being hacked and we lock everything down, I can't use it because you've locked it down, I can't troubleshoot it. And the fastest way when they call me is I call JTS, a provider, they remote in to the link so they can start troubleshooting it from home while they get their technicians out there. So this is that whole, the risk versus the reward thing, and it is.
correct, and that's where those agreements. So if you have an agreement with them and there's contractual language where, you know, if the guy VPNs in and he happens to have a bad bug on his computer and it comes onto the network, that's where, from a technology perspective, you have to have someone with a technology background that can read contracts and understand and then translate that and have the attorney, you know, verify how he's reading it, that you're going to be covered. Because a majority of the contracts, and I'll just speak to, you know, most organizations, and when I say most, I've gone to TAG ITM twice. I've talked to city government, I've talked to county type governments. Most of those entities, they're years behind as far as, like, for example, two-factor authentication. The city did two-factor authentication over about a year and a half ago. CGIS just required it in 2025. The reason why I'm in the position that I'm in is because I've seen the bad side. I work counterintelligence and cyber criminal investigations. I know vulnerabilities. I had to go to cities and municipalities and tell them, hey, you got compromised. And most of the time when I walked in there, they didn't know. And so my job as your provider is to make sure your environment is secure and as redundant as I can make it. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help the entities that are on there. I know I can't, you know, make your council or make your commissioners do things, but I can come, speak, educate, and help you if you need funding or if you have ideas on why or trying to justify the cost of something. I'm a tool that you can use for that.
I guess my concern is if Erath County has a problem, it needs to be your problem. And we need to all be in this same boat working together to make sure that it's everybody's problem and we're all hands on deck getting this thing resolved. And how do we get to that point? How do we develop that type of cooperation? I know that monitoring is a concern that we had. How do we make sure that we're not losing a tower for some silly reason because an air conditioner, you know, doesn't work? And perhaps that knock is the situation, or the solution, but.
So Harris currently treats each entity, because they have maintenance contracts with you. We don't have centralized services with them currently, and that's what I'm proposing. And if you look at this slide right here, callouts may occur either at customer's notification by knock, or notification by SOC if it's included in the contracted service. So currently, the city has, if there's a problem with the core or some city equipment, they contact us, we take care of it, you guys don't hear of it unless it caused an outage. If we go to this model, we can go to Harris and say, hey, and when I had a radio technician, when they were in Stephenville, they were having their recording logger problems, which under our current contract isn't covered, but under this enhanced, it talks about any system failure that causes a loss or any failure that renders a logging recorder inoperable or causes a loss of recording audio. It wasn't something that the city could fix because it was Harris related to the firewall, and they let our firewall licensing lapse, and so they couldn't do any configuration on it. That wasn't a city problem, and I gave them all kinds of heck about it. But the way the contracts are set up right now, we're kind of in our own pool. You guys are connected to us, but if it's a problem that you're having that doesn't require them to do anything on the Granbury core or on any of its network devices, then they're trying to fix it with you. When I had my radio technician, anytime there was problems, I said, when we had our meetings, I told them, hey, email us so that we're at least aware of it, and if you're not getting a response, then we can kind of help. But again, you guys have your own contracts, and this would change the contract because positions including cities of Granbury, Stephenville, counties of Hood, Erath, and Somerville. This creates kind of a unified contract where we can say, hey, when there's a problem, if it's in Stephenville, let Stephenville know, let dispatch know, and let Granbury know so that they're aware of it. And that's how it would be. Whereas right now, they're contacting, or you're contacting them, and they're not telling me, hey, Stephenville's having this problem unless it's something that is on our side that we have to fix. I hope that answered your question.
Back to that diagram that you had of the network.
Is this the most current one that you guys have in place that with building in Erath and Somerville?
As far as the documentation that I have, and that's part of my crux, and it's a IT crux, is this information was all compiled when the deputy chief had it. When I was a patrol officer, he was aggregating all this information. When he retired, he basically dumped the files over, and then when I had my radio technician come through, I said, hey, look at those files and pull the files that you believe are current and put them into the file and leave the previous deputy chief stuff the way it was. And I've been going through both of them to figure out which one. But again, I looked at this was out of their original contract, and this showed to me to be what I could find as the most recent.
So based on this diagram, and I'm just basing on this diagram because I don't know if there's nothing else. So you have single point failures again that all fall in Hood County, because you got Morgan Mill filling into Diamond A, but there's no link from Stephenville.
Those are spurs.
Right. So, but they didn't close the loop. There should be a loop from Northwest Tower to Morgan Mill, or Northwest Tower going to Morgan Mill with Prather Tower going to Morgan Mill. So there's a double link feeding into Diamond A. And if Morgan Mill can shoot a link to North Central, then you have like a triple loop, so you can get rid of these redundancies. So that would take out, like, I get fiber might be better with the redundancies, but you have single point failures again in that whole system, which we've been arguing against.
Correct, and that's nothing, I can do nothing about that. That is about what Harris sells to that entity, and that's where I said, if I saw this diagram and you were selling to a potential customer of mine, I would tell them, no, it's not, if you don't have the funding for it, it's not time to join this network. Try to keep going until you have the funding to get redundancy built in.
But it puts the onus on us again that when something goes down, like if they're hitting because if they're on that Morgan Mill side and they can't hit the Northwest Tower, they're going to lose the signal in the radio. And if they're calling for help, they're going to be screwed. So
a good example, Stephenville.
What? Oh, this diagram isn't correct?
Okay.
Yeah, they said it's very old and incorrect.
Because that's a whole lot of problems.
Okay.
And so from a documentation perspective, there are folders and folders of documentation that need to be classified. And from this perspective, I went through and looked at what was supposed to be new, and that was the contract that was proposed to them. So that's why I put this diagram in there to show what I thought was.
So what I'm trying to understand is, which I thought this was going to tell us, and I was going to ask you to go through it on what pieces of the network does the county own, and what pieces of the network does the city own?
So the city owns the East Tower, the cemetery, and the PD.
Okay, so the far right side, okay.
Correct.
And then the rest is owned by?
The county.
The county.
So Diamond, Those are towers. So it's how, and it has to do with topography, and that's where I was talking about fiber. I know United Co-op has fiber running east to west on 377, almost to Dublin. If we could get Stephenville to get on a fiber connection from Hood County or even from the PD, that would give connectivity there. That would give that other spur, that's not correct, but it would give it another redundant link. If for some reason a tower went down, the communications would still come across. Again, there's money, there's landowners and all of that type stuff, but there's other technologies. So for example, in the city, our SCADA network is another network that I manage that is air gapped from our city network. And currently it's running on radio. The radio isn't as fast as they want it to be because I created redundancy there because there wasn't redundancy there originally. And so the servers move information over, but there's a slight delay because radio is slow. What I am currently testing is a cellular link, not a cradle point, that I buy for $3,000 and I pay $39 a month, and I create a private ring with when our third water treatment plant eventually comes online, that's just for that.
Okay, so if, there's a lot of fours.
So
I
our
don't know what the
towers are
fours, but this-
our towers are Diamond, Cemetery, Hood County SO, North Central, and then Chalk Mountains in Somerville, but we own the microwave links in there that feed into everybody else.
Okay, so it looks to me that if this is what y'all are talking about, the single point of failure is this North Central Tower or the star that says Hood County Sheriff's Office. So if either of those go down or the Diamond Tower goes down, then nothing to the left over there they're all lost. Communication is lost to everything to the left.
So right now, the Chalk Mountain, if that goes down, we lose everything. So if anything going in Chalk Mountain is disrupted, then Stephenville, we're actually just we lose everything on our radio.
And back up, if you back up from there, if the North Central Tower goes down, then Chalk Mountain.
I'm not sure which tower was down in Hood County, but when we lost the radios for 3 days, that's what happened.
3 days?
Yes.
When did that happen?
That was during the first storm, when I was on my cruise.
Oh,
Yeah, so we lost, that's the problem with the links, right? Because if you don't have the loops, they can't loop around. But in that case, on the North Central Tower, we lost it's called ODUs. It's the link from there to Chalk Mountain and they're from Diamond A. So basically, the only way you were getting in is through Diamond A. You couldn't even do that. So
okay. I just wanted to make
really
sure
messed up.
that I understood this diagram. And even if it's old, I think the points that you all have made is still valid, even if this isn't, I don't know what the red and blue and yellow lines mean, but if those are, I mean, it says the legend there, but I don't know if those are accurate still.
So the other thing I wanted to address, so if you see the writing on there, this isn't something that should be public knowledge because it gives an adversary or a potential person a way to disrupt our system. So I put it up there just to kind of give an idea of what it is, but when you start getting into the details of it, it creates a compromise for the network.
Well, it's a public meeting. Okay.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Reeves?
So when you talk about the redundancy, I don't know, Sean, it's been, a year ago, we lost our communication from both of our stations when the link went down to ERAF in Somerville. And the reason being is when our radios were programmed, they're programmed to reach out to the first ring and then second ring and the third ring. Ours was programmed to the third ring, which is the Somerville. So when that link went down, we were not able to communicate until we had until either the system come back up, which was a day or two, or they had to come back and reprogram our radios. So that does happen, that it depends on how the radio is programmed to which link to hit first. If you lose that link, you're going to lose everything. And we here in Granbury lost our ability to communicate because of that one failure on that Chalk Mountain. So redundancy is key. If anything, it's whatever you can do. And I disagree with having two microwaves on one tower because the tower goes down. Or in the case of the big windstorm here 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were losing out of range because the links were moving and losing dB. So it's got to be some other way than what wind can or through the microwave system. But it's key that the redundancy's got to be there, or the system is going to fail.
And that's why I go back to fiber, because fiber is very stable. The only thing that messes it up is if it gets cut. But if it gets cut, hopefully we're not having a windstorm the same day, your system will still stay up.
You said at our meeting that United was doing it for free. Is that expired?
So United currently is trying to expand their fiber presence, especially in the commercial sector. So to give you an example, when the city stood up their new regional airport, our old airport was at Howard Clemens. I reached out to Spectrum because they're my provider, and I said, hey, how much would it be to extend my fiber to my new location? And initially came at $130,000, and the lowest I got them was 90. So I said, hey, I'm going to talk to United because I talked to them before. I called United Co-op up. They did it for free. And so I know they're running down different roads. I know they're running down Biloxi because I got them to run 2 free fiber drops at my house because I have 2 meters. So they give you drops based on how many meters, electric meters you have with them. So I got 2 drops put at my house. I know they're going down 377. They're in Stephenville. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's what I said.
Down 67 in front of the Chalk Mountain Tower to their location there, and then from there out one way.
Because I have relationships with their engineering team and their engineers. I actually have an appointment with them on Thursday to create a redundant fiber ring for our SCADA system. So they're going to each site. This is on 377. They don't own some of it, but they're going to give me a price on how much it's going to cost to run that so that I have my LTE if I decide to go with that solution, but then have the fiber as the primary and the LTE as a backup instead. So I don't know how long they're going to do it, but I mean, when they're trying to spread is when you try to get on board. And I could help facilitate that if that's required.
I'll let IT come up and speak to the fiber for Hood County. After the initial meeting with the city, we had IT go back and look and see what options we had for fiber and if it was available at a reduced rate. And what we found is that it's very expensive. But if you want more details, Chris, if you want to come up and talk to your interactions with United Co-op and Spectrum.
Let me interject before he gets here. So I just want to say the whole purpose of this whole Granbury Regional Radio Network is to roll out a communication system that was mandated by the federal government after 9/11 to be implemented by 2015. And if you're not aware of it, we didn't get this done till 2023 because typically counties lead in this effort because of the regionalism in the network, where you can see where it would have been so much better for us to be a small player in this and have a small footprint instead of the hosting this whole network. So I just want to say that we're glad to do that. We took the hit up front because we valued the safety of our officers, and the council was on board to fund this. We funded about $3 million all in to put this in place with the other infrastructure. So yeah, it's expensive, but it's critical to life safety. And I can't say that enough on the redundancy. And it would be so much easier if you know, this was all done through some big organization that knows every little detail about this before they started. But we're just a city that got into it to try to meet the federal requirements, And we're rolling forward, and we were hoping that the county would be able to join with us, and we were hoping that others would, so that we would have a regional approach to keep it as affordable on each jurisdiction that joins as humanly possible. So we're not trying to make any money, we're just trying to break even. When we put the fees together for you, we'll show you the full transparency, we'll give you a spreadsheet and let you analyze it, ask questions, whatever. But we're trying to extend the service beyond what it originally was. In summary, that's what we're trying to do, add the knock and the sock. And we think that will benefit everybody on the network. And so that adds cost, which causes us to sit here and have these meetings. And it's premature right now to come up with that spreadsheet because we're still working on getting everything from our vendor to put it together. So anyway, I'll turn it over to him, and thank you all for having this meeting today. I hope it helped.
City willing to entertain selling the whole core package to the county?
I bet so. I'd have to ask council, but I would think so.
Okay.
Because like I say, we got a lot of investment here.
That's probably, needs to be looked at a little deeper.
Okay?
Okay.
Good, thanks. Have to see what our contract provisions are with Harris too,
I understand.
So IT was approached by Sean and then by Margaret about getting fiber out to Peak, which is listed on there as North Central, the Diamond A, and then possibly Chalk Mountain. At the time, the fiber was for us for them to be able to monitor the equipment that's not being actually monitored by Harris, the generator, the air conditioning system, since I don't remember which tower it was that lost AC, Diamond A, and doors, possibly putting in cameras for security purposes and the like. I reached out to United Co-op, I reached out to Tri-County, and I reached out to Spectrum, since we already use them for our networking. Tri-County, they don't have any kind of internet connectivity. United Co-op lady laughed at me, said, I will get you over to an engineer, and took my contact information. I never heard back from them. Evidently, they do not have coverage at the Peak. They do not have coverage anywhere near around Diamond A. And as far as I know, they don't have any kind of fiber coverage at Chalk either. So all that left was Spectrum. Spectrum came back with an over-the-phone guesstimate just based on the locations. They had engineers go out and look, but I haven't gotten an actual paper quote of 6 digits per location.
Let me ask you this, to run fiber to every one of these towers is obviously extremely expensive. There's already fiber running down 377. If we created a point from the dispatch to Stephenville dispatch, and then can you backfeed through these towers to kind of secure the entire network? It seems like it benefits everybody. Is that not a more reasonable potential way to do this, even as a group effort? I mean, that benefits everybody. Everybody pitch in a little bit, make the connection, whatever we need to do. I don't know what these, I'm just shooting off the cuff here, but whatever it is to bring the whole network in. Again,
as far as the radio traffic, that would provide the radio loop, but that won't give you all the other information you might want about your tower that they were requesting, security.
That's expensive for that piece.
Temperature, and then getting I'm just talking about like if Chalk Mountain gets knocked down in a tornado.
Correct.
Instead of Stephenville being out there on their own, if this is all connected and even coming back through the Diamond A over to Morgan Mill down to Stephenville or vice versa, if the Diamond A gets knocked down, can we communicate off of the Morgan Mill tower with a fiber connection going down to Stephenville?
At that point, that would be the city would have to run fiber to Stephenville.
No, because we're connected to Hood County. We could connect.
But then we'd have to have a VPN, and you already said no VPNs.
VPN, a site-to-site VPN is different than VPN access into the core.
No, they're the same thing.
No.
Okay, I'll agree to
So-
disagree with you.
So his discussion where when you call the salespeople and say, hey, do you have this? They don't know what the future, the engineers are the ones that know where they want to go. And so when I initially called Spectrum and when I initially called United, I was talking to just a general person. Because of the relationship I had, I was able to talk to an engineer, and now I have that relationship. They know where the network's going. They're the ones that told me they're going to Dublin. And when I was at the owners meeting, LCRA, which is a huge Harris, they have, I think, 16,000 radios on their network. They come all the way up to Lampasas, and they told me that they were in communications with the co-ops in Lampasas trying to connect all the way to DFW because they want to have redundant connections for their electricity and other things like that. And so if you talk to a salesperson, they're going to look at a map and see what they're able to sell. But when you talk to the actual engineer that's designing the network for that organization, they know what the plans are and where they're going to go.
This Thursday meeting is coming up. Did you ask the engineer that they're going to Diamond A or be interested in going to Diamond A?
I could ask him that question. The Stephenville, to me, the Stephenville or the North Central would have been, because I know there's fiber running that way. The Peak Road one, there's some private land and some other stuff associated with that, so I don't know how far away they are.
There's no United Co-op fiber at
Currently, but they run down that road to service the houses that are there.
don't have any plans to run there yet.
Okay, well, I can have that discussion offline with the engineer tomorrow when I see him. But to me, the best deal would be to go down 377 and, because they're on 377, and tie in that way, and then
And they'll tie into you?
they can tie into me. I'm at the airport at 377, down Howard Clemens and West Pearl. If they want to tie into me, they'll tie into me. It's fine.
So Sean, Margaret, you have any other, or anybody else? It's a workshop, so anybody got any?
No, I think the next thing is that you guys are going to provide a draft copy of the new contract.
Correct. So our next step is projected right now. We're going to go to council with our draft interlocal agreement on the meeting of the 20th. And once we have that draft, we will send it to the entities, including you guys, that so that you can get a look at it. And if they approve it, then you know that's what it's going to be. And if you need changes or want addendums on there, for example, with the VPN access, if that's something you guys want to have and you want to have that on there as an addendum, our caveat is that there's just some fiduciary language associated with it. If there happens to be a breach, that, you know, the cost to bring the network and make it whole is shared.
I think that, you know, going back to what Mr. Kaufman said, and when this was originally, I guess this idea or is he still here? This requirement was created by 9/11. I mean, I think we just need to look at, is this the right model for the regional network, for all of these entities, all of these counties, or does it need to be a different model as far as where the core is, who is responsible for it? So, I mean, just like we were talking about earlier, there's 90 to 100 radios for the city, but there's 700 for the county. We have the 911. The county is responsible for 24/7, 365 911 access. So should this be our responsibility, the county's responsibility? We just, you know, glad we had this because we can't talk about this without it being in a public workshop. So glad you brought this up, but I think this is something we're going to have future discussions about.
So I will say this so that you guys are aware. If you say you took our cores, you would still have the same problem you have today. You would just be collecting money from the city and paying all of the costs associated with the system right now.
Yeah, I'm not specifically,
The communication problem
yeah,
would still be the
that's-
same. It's not going to remove the spurs. It's not going to remove any of that aspect. It's just going to be it's going to be the county's problem to address.
okay, I think there needs to be a,
Just so we can be clear, this goes back a long way. The counties have the opportunity to do this for 20 years and
Could you
it's
please-
refused to do it.
could you please come up to the microphone?
Sure, y'all can probably hear me pretty clear. But this has been attempted to be done for 20 years and the county has not wanted to do it at all since then. It got to the point to where it needed to be done and the city stepped up and do it. So the idea of talking or discussing where this needs to be is way gone. That's no longer even a conversation anymore. The opportunity the county had to do this was a long time ago and they didn't do it, all the way up until the city did it. The core's set, it's in the city, that's what we got to deal with now is making it all work, right? And the problem that we're having and it's being discussed is the lack of redundancy in the system. The city has redundancy in our system. We can't force you to spend the money to have the redundancy. We can't make Stephenville or Glen Rose spend the money to do the redundancy. That's all up to each entity on whether or not they want to spend the money to make sure that nothing happens to their system. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, it's just that the way it's designed right now with the county responsible for everything, the connections to everything to the left, just it doesn't make sense to me, but we'll continue to have some discussions about it.
And I'll add to, our meeting on Monday was with the two of us and then some city officials from the city of Granbury, and it was really productive. We talked about a handful of ways that we can mitigate this moving forward, and a lot of it is just going to be adding language or adding things into the interlocal agreement. And my understanding is that they're going to work with us on it before it goes to you guys. That way we can get some of this stuff addressed and try to start working towards it. Because
yeah, I'm for what makes the most sense for the whole network to be safe and secure and redundant, and make sure that that all the communication continues to happen, because failures in communication cause people's lives, and we don't want that. So we need to make sure that this is as secure as it can be and that it's monitored 24/7, 365.
And that's why I personally have involved myself going forward with any new, I obviously can't go and change what happened in Stephenville, what's happening, but I allow them to understand that, hey, that's a single point of failure. Like when Stephenville had its original failure, I was like, how'd they go down? Did the tower go down or something like that? And they're like, no, I thought it was a catastrophic failure, but they were like, no, it's a microwave link that went down and it's a single point of failure. And I was like, that should have never been designed. Again, like the chief said, it goes to the cost. If I go with Harry on a sale and they can only afford a single point of failure solution because that's all they can afford, it's not the right time for them to join. Because if it is someone's life or death and for some reason the wind moves the tower the wrong way and they lose communications, that's a big liability in my aspect, and I'm not an attorney, so.
All right. Anybody else? If not, at 2:45, this workshop's adjourned. Thank all of you for coming. Good start.